Hi y'all, I got a comment on my channel, on one of the videos on my channel, the video called how the wife almost became the ex-wife. And I got a comment from a girl named Carla and I wanted to address it here. She said, so in that video, I'm talking about some of the fighting that Mike and I had been doing at the time and how I was getting off of my Anavar cycle because it was not helping. It was making me very aggressive and it was not helping with our communication or anything like that. And so I kind of detailed some of that in that video. And Carla sent me a message and said, I'm not married, so I don't think my opinion is very valuable, but I think much of the arguing has to do with the hormonal changes due to the menopause plus the PEDs. You already look amazing unless you're planning to compete. I don't think it's worth it to risk your health and femininity. Plus, I think couples should focus on growing together. Your singleness was the period to focus on yourself and figuring you out. I think getting into all those new age practices can only grow you apart. And I thought this was worth just making a little video to respond to that because first of all, I don't think you have to be married to have valuable input on these things. And sometimes it's a really good to see the perception of somebody who's not married, how they're looking at your marriage, because sometimes it can be really eye-opening. So I do value your opinions. As far as, and I want to say thank you for the kind compliment. But as far as the arguing having to do with hormonal changes and PEDs, I believe that has a lot to do with that argument at that time. It has a lot to do with a number of the arguments we've had over the years, but Mike and I did not have a super healthy relationship when it came to communication, or especially to arguing, from the get-go. From day one, we have struggled with that. And so whether before we were manipulating hormones, before there were any PEDs involved, long before, we were struggling with that, and we would have these arguments that were represented in this video. And so it's while these are contributing factors, they definitely weren't the cause. But the most important thing I really wanted to address here was, she says, I think that couples should focus on growing together. Your singleness was the period to focus on yourself and figuring you out. I think getting into all those new age practices can only grow you apart. And so to me, I think that when you're single, you are one person, and that person doesn't change entirely just because you get married, or just because you have kids, or just because you get a different job, or whatever it might be. But there are things about you over time, over your life, because of certain life events that change a lot about who you are, and change a lot about how you communicate with other people. And getting married is one of those things. So if you're not exactly the same person when you get married that you were when you were single. And Mike and I have discovered that in a big way. And you're not exactly the same person when you're with, we've each been married twice. I'm not the same person with him that I was with my ex-husband, and the same goes for him with his ex-wife. So I think that, first of all, it's important to know that you're gonna change. And then a couple years after Mike and I had gotten married, and we were in the midst of this, and actually I guess it was several years, we'd been married for several years, and I had made the comment to him after we'd been fighting and then trying to figure things out, and things were kind of smoothing out, and I had made the comment that I realized that our relationship was ever evolving, but we weren't necessarily evolving with it, and our communication wasn't evolving with it. And I think that's really important, because as we change, as different life events happen, even when they happen to us as a couple, it changes us individually, not just as a couple. We've had a lot of big life events in our marriage, and the way we communicate about those things has to evolve to meet the new needs of the other person and to meet our own needs. And one of the things that I really have struggled with a lot in this marriage, is even knowing my own needs well enough to communicate them to him, to let him know what I need from him. I have struggled with that greatly in this relationship, and that's one of the things that I've really worked on and I think improved on. But I think that it's also important to realize that anytime we stop working on ourselves, we're no longer great for our partner. So all it takes is a few months of me getting complacent and going, oh, I was doing really well, so that I'm just letting it ride for a while. We're gonna have peace for a while. And no sooner do I do that than something will blow up, because I'm no longer focused on what I need to be doing, what I need to be changing, what his new needs may be, how his, his feelings or experiences might be changing who he is or evolving some. And I realized that for me especially, I'm not a spiritual person now, and I'm not religious, and I'm not very spiritual at all. But the way I grew up was super, super religious and very, very spiritual. And I realized that I use that as a way to not focus on my issues. So in fact, the way I grew up, there's always this talk about, working on yourself, but it was all in relation to God and what God would have you do. And I was forever trying to be whoever God wanted me to be, and that was not me. And so in this marriage, I've had to figure out who I am as an individual, and then at who I am as I'm changing. It's a lot. And so noting your own issues and owning my own issues as my own, and not as something that the devil made me do or something the devil is, putting on me or whatever. These are just things I was born with, or things that, I haven't handled, large events in my life that have changed me to some degree. And so I'm not dealing with, the dark side of me. I don't want to admit there's a dark side. I'm the good girl. I do think I'm sweet and kind and right. So I don't have this mean streak. I'm not this evil bitch that sometimes I can be. So when he says I'm being an evil bitch, obviously he's wrong, right? So it has taken a long time for me to go, okay, there's got to be a reason. We all think Mike's a little nuts, but he's not just going, you're an evil bitch for no reason. There's something there, and I am not seeing it in myself. And taking the time and doing the things that were necessary to not only see those things, but also accept them, and then not put just a value judgment on everything, but to be able to just, I hate to say this, so dumb, but to sit with that, just to be able to sit with those things and say, there are things that are going on with me that I'm not wanting to admit to myself, which means I need to get them out and focus on them for a bit so that I can recognize them when they appear. I wasn't even recognizing my own attitudes or behaviors when they would appear because I didn't believe that I was really having them. He would sometimes say, you're mad at me. And I'd be like, I'm not mad about anything, because I didn't want to believe that I could be mad at my husband. That's ridiculous. And so when, some of this new age stuff that she's talking about was because I was talking about some the Jungian psychology and meditation, and maybe some of that's new age, but it's not very spiritual for me. The meditation has a lot to do with clearing my mind and the anxiety, being mindfulness, but calming all the voices, all those old voices that I don't need to listen to anymore. All the parts of me that say, this is you, no, this isn't you. This is you, no, this isn't you. This is the good thing. This is the bad thing. And just letting be what is. I had to be able to be calm enough and quiet my mind enough to even start accepting any of those things. And it's only been in the last year or so that I've been able to do that to any degree, really, very, very, at least very consistently. And really to accept all the good and the bad of myself, if we want to call it good and bad. But you know what I mean? Like the things that the world sees as positive, the world sees as negative, or, whatever somebody else might think about it. And accept those for what they are, so that I can look at them and go, okay, what are some things I can do to help me cope better? Or how can I use these, quote, positives and negatives, whatever, strengths, weaknesses, these different parts of my character or my personality to be a better person, a better wife, a better mom. And that's really hard. You can even hear when I'm talking about it, it's hard not to use language that is making a judgment about who I am, or what even my thoughts, my feelings. And because I think perhaps this is true of everybody, I think especially because the way I grew up, where everything was sinful or not, it was godly or not, it was acceptable in my church or not, it put me in this constant place of never good enough. And I think that like I'm not a person that has in my life dealt with a lot of self-esteem issues, but I definitely realized that deep down I was sometimes feeling, or often feeling, like not enough. I was comparing myself as a mom. I was forever comparing myself to my mother, who I thought was the perfect mom. And so I was never a good enough mom because I wasn't like her, or a good enough wife because I wasn't like her, or, you know, or somebody else from my church that I knew or that I loved, or my sisters, or, you know, all these things. In fact, I was forever comparing Mike to my dad. Mike is so different from my dad in almost every way. I mean, in a lot of ways. And so I thought, you know, my dad's the perfect man in the entire world. And so anytime Mike wasn't like my dad, which was ridiculous because they're just not alike, I was making a judgment call on him. And then it makes it really easy for me to place all that blame on someone else. And so when I say working on myself, these things were really important. These things are really important for me to move forward. And what I've realized over the last year, 8, 9 months that I've been working on this, is that I make progress and I feel really good about it. And then I've got to do it again and again and more, and realize how those parts of me that I've accepted are also changing. And so I've got to accept them all over again, or accept the new things that are happening. And in doing that, I think I've become a better mom. I think I've become a better wife. I hope Mike would say that. But I've become a better and more comfortable version of me, like a version that I'm more comfortable with, because I'm more accepting of myself. There's much less of this image I need everybody to see that's positive. And so because there's not so much of that persona that I'm putting out there, I'm a happier person in general. And I think I'm more able to, one of the big complaints that Mike has had a lot of times when he's talked to me is, you're not putting yourself in my shoes. And I would always be like, well, yes, I am, obviously. But I'm not, because I'm putting myself, perhaps, I'm trying to put myself in his experience, but I'm not trying to see it from his view, if that makes sense. Because the way I would experience something, we all the time, we sit in the same experience, or the same situation, have two totally different experiences of it. In fact, when we used to go to counseling, we would leave the therapist's office. I would be like, oh, well, he said this, this, and this. And Mike would say, no, he said the opposite. Our perception of what was happening in that room was so different, because we are so different, that it would often end in an argument. And so when he's saying things like, you're not putting yourself in my shoes, I'm like, I'm really good at that. Like, I'm really good about going, oh, that person must be feeling this, or this might be. In fact, we have this thing, he kind of makes fun of me about it. I think it irritates him. But like, when I'm driving and somebody's like taking that turn really slowly in front of me, and you know, you really just want to slam into the back of their car, but my mind goes, you know what? I wonder if they have pies in their back seat. Because I've had pies in my back seat before, and I would take a turn very slowly because I don't want my pies to be going all over the car. And so those are literal, like, truly things that I think to myself on a regular basis. Whereas I'm in that situation, I'm just coming up with reasons that that person might be doing that. And that's what I do with Mike too. I come up with reasons for why he might be reacting the way he is, or having the feelings he's having. And so I try to fix that from who I am, not trying to truly understand what's happening from his perception, the way he's actually feeling. And so every time that I fail to do that, it's a problem in our marriage. I was about to say it's a disaster. It's not always a disaster, because he understands, you know, too. But I just think that realizing this, and even accepting that this is something I'm not good at, because I would have said I was good at it, that there are a lot of things in my life that I have done just enough work to go to look like I'm doing something good, instead of, or look like I am someone good, instead of actually doing the hardest work of accepting what is not good, or accepting what is not as socially acceptable about myself, and then working on that, or determining how I really feel about it and not how I think I should feel. Our therapist used to always say, don't should yourself. And that was a real problem for me. And so not only would I should myself, but I would also should Mike. So one of the things about our relationship that is so good, and one of my least favorite things at the same time, is that Mike cannot not tell you what he thinks of you. He can't do it. So I'll try to sugarcoat things and try to make him feel good about something, and he's just going to tell me what he thinks that the issue is with me, and then it's up to me to do something with what he tells me. Sometimes I just have to go and let that go, and sometimes I have to go, okay, this is something I really need to think about, and not just think about exactly what he's saying, but even why he's saying it, or what I'm doing to make him think that. It's hard work, and it's constant work, and to say that doesn't need to be done in a marriage, if you're not doing that in a marriage, I'm afraid your marriage might not be very healthy. And I say that from experience, and in 2 marriages where I wasn't doing that. And it's real easy to think that everything is the other person's fault when you're not looking at yourself. And I could even say to people, like I said it all the time, like, in my first marriage, it was easy to make that guy look like the bad guy. And he was not just a bad person. He just had a lot going on. And so it was so easy to be like, I've tried everything there is as a wife. And when we split up, I used to say, I stayed long enough to make sure I had tried everything I could so I could feel good about leaving. Now, more than a decade later, I can look at that and go, oh my God, that poor man. Like it looks very different to me because I wasn't dealing with me at all. And so the same thing has happened in this relationship a lot. So anytime that I wasn't working on me, I wasn't working on our relationship, because all I was doing was pointing the finger at somebody else. All that to say, this is way longer than it should have been, but Carla, I appreciate the comment. I value that, and I think that it's something for you to think about. And hopefully, if someday you do choose to get married, you will continue to work on yourself all the time. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.